Black CEO humiliated by billionaire Heiress at Gala. By sunrise, she owned the $2.9b empire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. But when Lisa, the billionaire heiress, looked at Vanessa, her expression hardened with contempt. "You don't belong here," she sneered, her voice cutting through the high-end Gala like a blade. The room went silent, tension thick in the air. Vanessa's grip tightened around her champagne flute, but she didn't flinch. In that moment, she knew exactly what was happening. The subtle sneer, the judging glances, the whispers. It wasn't the first time she had been treated this way. But tonight was different. Tonight, Vanessa was going to show them who she really was. "You think you can humiliate me?" Vanessa whispered, her voice steady. "Watch me take control." Lisa's laugh echoed, but Vanessa's words were already setting the stage for what was to come. By sunrise, Vanessa wasn't just going to walk away from this. She was going to take ownership of everything. Every inch of the empire that Lisa had always taken for granted. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning of a story that will leave you speechless. Vanessa dialed her assistant. "Prepare the protocol. It's time. CTA. Don't miss the shocking transformation of a black CEO who turns humiliation into a billion-dollar empire. Watch till the end to see how Vanessa makes her move." Vanessa stood there, her eyes locked on Lisa as the heiress continued to smirk, completely unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. The gala's atmosphere, once filled with clinking glasses and polite conversation, now felt suffocating, charged with the tension between the two women. Vanessa could feel the weight of every stare in the room as whispers spread like wildfire, but she didn't let it rattle her. The humiliating words still echoed in her ears. "You don't belong here." It wasn't just a dismissal. It was a subtle reminder of everything Vanessa had fought to overcome. This wasn't just a personal insult. This was a direct attack on her very existence in spaces like this. Spaces that had long been dominated by people like Lisa. She could see the shock in the eyes of the other guests, but it didn't matter. Tonight, Vanessa was going to prove that she belonged, not just in this room, but in every room like it. As she turned to leave, she pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to her assistant. "It's time. Activate Protocol 7. Within moments, her phone buzzed with a confirmation. Her assistant, Carla, was ready. Vanessa knew what she had to do. She walked with purpose, the sound of her heels clicking against the polished marble floors echoing in the now quiet room. The energy had shifted, and the eyes that had once judged her were now following her every move. As Vanessa made her way toward the exit, Lisa's voice called out to her. "I'm sure you're just another one of those charity cases, hoping to make a name for yourself in this world." But Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. The best response was action, not words. She stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of the situation still pressing down on her. She made one more call, her voice steady as she spoke to Carla. "Make sure the board is ready for the meeting tomorrow. I want full access to the assets. It's time to take control." By the time the sun rose, everything would be different. Vanessa wasn't just going to take back what was hers. She was going to build an empire that couldn't be denied. She wasn't just a black woman in a white-dominated space. She was a force to be reckoned with. And by the end of this, Lisa and everyone who had doubted her would realize the power of underestimating her. The game was just beginning, and Vanessa was playing to win. The next morning, Vanessa woke up early, her mind already racing with the plan she had set into motion. As the sun began to rise over the city skyline, she stood by the window of her penthouse, overlooking the bustling streets below. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day ahead settle in. It wasn't just about the humiliation from the gala anymore. This was bigger. It was about sending a message, proving that power wasn't about the color of your skin or the size of your inheritance. It was about what you could achieve when you refused to be overlooked. As she sat down at her desk, Carla's message popped up on her phone. The board is ready. They've agreed to your terms. Vanessa's lips curled into a small, confident smile. This was the moment. She wasn't just going to reclaim her rightful place in the world she had worked so hard to build. She was going to reshape it entirely. She called Carla, her voice calm and calculated. Prepare the documents. We're acquiring Summit Enterprises today. The decision had been made. Summit Wealth Bank, the very institution that had once looked down on her, was now within her reach. It had been 2 years since she had purchased the majority shares, quietly working behind the scenes to secure her stake. Now, the time had come to make her presence felt. The meeting was set for later that afternoon, but Vanessa knew that by the end of it, Summit would no longer belong to the privileged few. It would belong to her, and she would ensure that no one could ever again dismiss her or people like her in the way they had the night before. As she prepared for the meeting, she glanced at her phone again, seeing Lisa's name in her inbox. The message was short and to the point. You should know your place. Vanessa didn't flinch. She didn't need to respond to that kind of venom. Her actions would speak louder than any words ever could. The time for playing small was over. Vanessa was stepping into her power, and this time, there would be no turning back. The meeting with the board was set to begin at noon, but Vanessa had already arrived early, her calm demeanor belying the storm brewing beneath the surface. As she walked into the boardroom, her heels clicked with purpose against the polished floor, each step echoing with the weight of the decision she was about to make. The room was filled with the top executives of Summit Enterprises, all seated around the long, sleek conference table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They had no idea what was coming. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding attention. She didn't wait for pleasantries or introductions. She went straight to the point. Today, we are making history, she began, her voice steady and clear. I am here to take control of this company, not as an outsider, but as the person who will lead it into a new era. A time when the doors are open to everyone, not just the privileged few. The board members exchanged nervous glances, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Lisa, sitting at the far end, folded her arms and sneered, clearly unimpressed. You think you can take this company from me? She scoffed. You're nothing but a pawn in a game you don't understand. Vanessa didn't flinch. She locked eyes with Lisa, her gaze unwavering. I'm not a pawn, she said, her voice sharp and filled with authority. I am the queen, and this game has already been decided. Vanessa slid a stack of papers across the table, the official acquisition documents, now in the hands of every board member. I have already acquired enough of the shares to make this move. By the end of today, this company will belong to me. The room went silent as the realization hit. Vanessa had outmaneuvered them all, playing a long game that none of them had seen coming. Lisa's smug expression faltered, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. Vanessa leaned forward, her tone lowering, but still carrying the same confidence. You can't stop me, she said. Not today, not ever again. The atmosphere shifted. The room, once filled with doubt, now buzzed with uncertainty. This wasn't just a takeover, it was a statement. Vanessa wasn't just taking control of Summit Enterprises. She was taking control of her destiny. The board members knew it. Lisa knew it. And by the time the meeting ended, there would be no denying Vanessa's power. The empire that had once looked down on her was now hers to shape, and she would make sure it would never be the same. By the end of the meeting, the board members had been left stunned, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Lisa sat there, her face a mask of disbelief, her usual arrogance replaced by a simmering frustration she could barely contain. Vanessa had taken the company, not with force or threats, but with calm precision. She had been playing the long game, and now, every move had led her to this moment of victory. As the room began to empty, the weight of what Vanessa had just accomplished hung heavy in the air. She stood, gathering her things, ready to leave, but not before taking one last look at the now quiet faces around her. I hope you all remember this day, Vanessa said, her voice calm but filled with undeniable authority. This is the last time you will ever underestimate me. With those words, she walked out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving behind a room full of people who now had no choice but to accept the reality. The empire that once rejected her was now under her control. As she stepped out into the bright sunlight of the city, her phone buzzed with messages from Carla, confirming the final details of the acquisition. Vanessa smiled, her confidence unwavering. This wasn't just a victory over Summit Enterprises. It was a victory over every person who had ever doubted her because of her race, her gender, or her background. The world had seen her as an outsider, but now, she was the one in charge, the one making the rules. She would no longer just walk into rooms, she would own them. As the day went on, news of the acquisition began to spread, and by nightfall, Vanessa was everywhere. Headlines read, "Black CEO takes control of billion-dollar empire. Vanessa Clark shakes the foundations of Summit Enterprises." But this was just the beginning. Vanessa knew that real change didn't happen overnight. It happened in moments like these, when you proved that the system could be broken and rebuilt. And she was ready to rebuild, not just her company, but the entire industry. The days of playing by other people's rules were over. Now, she would write her own. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and relentless press coverage. Vanessa was everywhere on the news, in magazines, on social media, but despite the media frenzy, she remained focused, unwavering in her mission to reshape Summit Enterprises and the entire industry. She knew that her real work had just begun. Her victory in the boardroom was only the first step. Now, she had to change the culture of the company from the ground up. The first thing she did was call a company-wide meeting. It was time for everyone to hear her vision, straight from the source. As she stood in front of the room, the same board members who had once doubted her were now looking to her for direction. Vanessa didn't waste time with small talk. "This company will no longer be run by the old guard," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "From this moment forward, we will be an example of diversity, equality, and fairness. Every decision we make will be centered around those values." There were murmurs in the room, some skeptical, others uncertain, but Vanessa's gaze was firm, unyielding. She wasn't just talking about policies, she was talking about a complete shift in how Summit Enterprises would operate. She could already feel the resistance building, but it didn't matter. She had come too far to let anyone or anything stand in her way. After the meeting, the real work began. Vanessa spent hours going through the company's records, identifying areas where change was needed. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing a company's culture, especially one as entrenched in tradition as Summit, would take time. But Vanessa was used to fighting for what she wanted. She had spent her whole life proving that she belonged, and now she would do the same for everyone else. The more she dug, the more she realized how deep the bias ran within the company. It was in the hiring practices, the promotions, and the very way people were treated. But Vanessa was determined to make Summit a place where everyone, regardless of their background, would have the opportunity to succeed. She knew it wouldn't be a quick fix, but every step she took was one closer to the future she envisioned. The company wasn't just hers now. It was her responsibility. As she sat at her desk, the weight of it all sinking in, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Carla. "The shareholders are calling for a meeting." Vanessa didn't hesitate. She knew what had to be done. "Set it up," she replied. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon, and Vanessa knew it would be a defining moment. As the time drew closer, she felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. This wasn't just about making changes within the company anymore. It was about securing her place in the history of Summit Enterprises. She was prepared for whatever resistance she would face. But she also knew that the eyes of the business world were on her. She was no longer just a black CEO. She was a symbol of what could be achieved when you refused to be sidelined. As she entered the conference room, the shareholders were already seated, a mix of old faces and new, their expressions unreadable. Lisa, who had remained silent in the days following the takeover, was there too, her posture rigid and her eyes cold. Vanessa took a deep breath and stood before them. "You've all seen the headlines. You've seen what I've done, but now, I need to hear from you. Are you with me, or are you still clinging to the old ways?" The room went silent. Some shareholders shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others stared at her, calculating their next move. Vanessa didn't let the tension faze her. She knew this was her moment to take full control. She wasn't asking for permission, she was demanding their allegiance. I've made it clear that Summit Enterprises will no longer be a place where only a select few benefit from its success. We are going to build a company that's open to all. We're going to build a company that doesn't just pay lip service to diversity, but actively seeks it out at every level. She paused, letting her words sink in. I've made the changes, and I'm committed to ensuring that no one in this company will ever again be overlooked, underpaid, or mistreated based on their race, gender, or background. This is the future of Summit, and if you're not on board, I suggest you leave now. Lisa opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Vanessa held up her hand. I've heard enough from you, Lisa. This is my company now, and I don't need your approval to run it. The tension in the room was palpable, but Vanessa stood tall, unwavering in her resolve. The shareholders, one by one, began to nod, their silence giving way to reluctant approval. Vanessa could see the shift happening. The power dynamics were already changing. It was clear that they realized she wasn't going to back down. As the meeting came to a close, Vanessa knew that this was more than just a takeover. It was a transformation. By the time she walked out of the room, Summit Enterprises had already begun to evolve into the company she had always envisioned. A company where people like her, people of color, would no longer be on the outside looking in. In the weeks that followed the shareholders' meeting, Vanessa wasted no time in making sweeping changes. Summit Enterprises had always been a company where the old guard called the shots, but now, the boardrooms and offices were filled with new faces, diverse, capable, and ready to transform the company. As Vanessa looked over the company's new structure, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had done what they said couldn't be done, but the real test was just beginning. The media frenzy that had surrounded her acquisition of Summit Enterprises was still at its peak, but now, the question was, could she deliver on her promises? Could she reshape an entire company and, in doing so, reshape an entire industry? Vanessa knew the answer. She had always known. The next big move would take place at the company's annual gala, a tradition where the most influential players in the industry gathered to celebrate their achievements. For years, this event had been a symbol of exclusivity, a space where only the elite, the well-connected, and the privileged thrived. But this year, Vanessa was going to make sure it was different. The gala would no longer be a celebration of the same old faces and the same old practices. It would be a statement. She was not just changing the makeup of her company. She was changing the entire industry's expectations of what a successful leader looked like. She picked up the phone and dialed Carla's number. Make sure the guest list is ready. I want the right people in the room this year. Carla responded with a note of surprise. Are you sure? The old guard is still going to be there, and you know how they feel about change. Vanessa smiled, her voice steady. Let them come. Let them see what real leadership looks like. By the time the night of the gala arrived, the energy in the air was electric. Vanessa stood in front of the grand hall, a figure of grace and power, in her elegant black dress, as she surveyed the crowd. The people she had fought so hard to bring in, people who had been overlooked and undervalued in the past, were now standing alongside the industry's elite. As she walked into the ballroom, she was greeted with a mixture of glances, some with admiration, others with disdain. But none of that mattered. Vanessa had come to show them all that she was no longer an outsider. She was now the face of the future. As she made her way to the front of the room, she could hear the murmurs, the whispers of disbelief. People were still trying to process the idea of a black woman, a woman who had been underestimated her entire life, standing at the top of a billion-dollar empire. But she knew that by the end of the night, they would understand. She was here to stay. The evening progressed with all eyes on Vanessa, who stood at the center of the gala, radiating confidence and authority. As she moved through the crowd, she could sense the undercurrent of surprise, even disbelief. The old guard, the ones who had never truly believed she belonged, were now forced to acknowledge her power. Lisa, who had made her presence known earlier with a cold smile, was nowhere to be seen. The whispers started to subside as the evening wore on, replaced by conversations filled with curiosity and admiration. Vanessa's presence had disrupted the status quo. But it wasn't just her presence that made an impact, it was her actions. As the night went on, she gave a speech, one that would mark the beginning of a new era for Summit Enterprises. The room grew silent as she stepped up to the podium, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. This company has always been about power, privilege, and exclusion. Vanessa began, her voice steady and filled with purpose. But I stand here tonight to tell you that the future of Summit will be different. The future will be about inclusion, equity, and opportunity for everyone, not just the privileged few. We will create a space where all voices are heard, where diversity is celebrated, and where hard work and talent determine who gets ahead. Her words were met with a mix of applause and uneasy silence. It was clear that some were uncomfortable with her boldness, while others felt inspired. She continued, "This gala is not just a celebration of the past, it is a look into the future, a future where people of color, women, and those from underserved communities are no longer overlooked. I am here to change that, to build a company where we all thrive." As she spoke, Vanessa saw the shift happening right before her eyes. There were still some who couldn't accept the changes, but they were becoming fewer. By the end of her speech, Vanessa could feel the energy in the room change. People were beginning to see her not just as the black CEO who had taken over, but as the visionary leader who was changing the landscape of the industry. The gala was no longer about the same old elite. It was about a new kind of power, one that was inclusive, authentic, and, above all, deserved. As the night came to a close, Vanessa stood by the window, gazing out at the city below. She had made her mark. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready. Summit Enterprises was hers now, and she would lead it with unwavering conviction. She had fought for this moment, and now, no one would ever question her place at the top again. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Vanessa. She had taken control of Summit Enterprises, but now, the true challenge began. She worked tirelessly, reshaping every aspect of the company, from the corporate culture to the way business was conducted. Her focus was clear: create a company where inclusion and equity were not just buzzwords, but lived realities. Every decision she made, every policy she put in place, had one goal in mind: to ensure that no one, regardless of their background, would ever again be dismissed the way she had been. Yet, not everyone was pleased with the changes. The resistance, while muted in public, was palpable behind closed doors. Vanessa received numerous reports of sabotage attempts, complaints about her leadership, and whispers that questioned her ability to lead such a vast empire. Lisa, despite her defeat, still clung to power in the shadows, trying to influence key executives. But Vanessa wasn't concerned. She knew this was part of the process. You don't change an institution without ruffling feathers, and she was more than prepared to handle it. It wasn't until one particularly tense board meeting that the full scope of the opposition became clear. As she stood at the front of the room, presenting her vision for Summit's next steps, one of the senior board members, an old ally of Lisa's, raised his hand. "Vanessa, with all due respect," he began, his tone condescending, "I don't think the company is ready for these radical changes. This isn't just about diversity and inclusion, it's about our bottom line." Vanessa paused, her gaze sweeping the room, assessing the faces of the board members who were still holding on to outdated beliefs. "I understand your concerns," she replied, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "But let me be clear, the company's bottom line will thrive because of these changes, not in spite of them. If you want to continue doing business the old way, then maybe you're right. But if you want to build an empire that lasts, then you'll have to follow a new path. This is the future, and I am leading it." There was a long pause. The tension in the room was thick, but Vanessa held her ground. One by one, the board members began to nod, some reluctantly, others more enthusiastically. She had earned their respect, not through force or intimidation, but through the strength of her vision. By the end of the meeting, her plan was approved, and the foundation for Summit's transformation was set. Vanessa left the boardroom with a sense of accomplishment, but she knew the real work was still ahead. This was just the beginning of the legacy she was building, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Summit Enterprises was no longer just a company, it was her platform for change, and she would stop at nothing to ensure that the world would know it. With the board's approval, Vanessa wasted no time implementing the changes she had outlined for Summit Enterprises. She had already begun reshaping the company culture, but now it was time for the real challenge, to prove that her vision could turn into something tangible. As she worked tirelessly to execute her plans, she encountered resistance from unexpected places. Some of her closest allies, those who had supported her during the acquisition, began to waver, questioning whether her radical approach would pay off. But Vanessa never faltered. She had seen firsthand what it was like to be underestimated, and she was not about to let anyone push her off course. She knew that transforming an entire company would not happen overnight. It required not just a change in policies, but a complete shift in mindset, one that would take time to settle in. The media, once hailing her as a disruptor, now began to question whether her bold moves would truly succeed in the long run. Can a black CEO really change the game? The headlines read, as critics weighed in with doubts about her leadership. Vanessa didn't let the negativity affect her. She had been through much worse in her life than a few harsh words from the press. She focused on what mattered, transforming Summit into a company that wasn't just about profit, but about creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked for far too long. One of the first big tests came when Vanessa made the decision to overhaul Summit's hiring practices. The company would no longer tolerate the old patterns of bias that had kept talented individuals out of the door, simply because of their race or background. She implemented a new recruitment policy, ensuring that every candidate had a fair chance, and that Summit's workforce would reflect the diversity of the world it served. As expected, the change was met with skepticism from the old guard. Some senior managers and executives balked at the idea, questioning how they could continue to thrive in a world where merit didn't solely dictate success. But Vanessa stood firm. She addressed the issue head-on, saying, "Merit isn't just about what you know, it's about who you are and how you contribute to the greater whole. Diversity doesn't weaken us, it strengthens us." The room went silent. For the first time, there was no pushback, no arguments. Vanessa had made her case, and her conviction was undeniable. As the weeks passed, the shift in Summit's culture became apparent. New, diverse faces began to fill the offices, and the company's reputation slowly began to change. People who had once been overlooked for their gender, race, or background were now rising to the top. Vanessa knew that this was just the beginning. The work was far from over, but she also knew that with each step forward, she was proving that her leadership was not just a momentary change, it was the start of a revolution. Summit Enterprises would never be the same, and neither would the industry. The world was watching, and Vanessa was ready to show them what true leadership looked like. As the months passed, Vanessa watched Summit Enterprises transform before her eyes. The changes were not only visible in the company's policies but in its people: new hires, fresh faces, a sense of purpose that had never been there before. Summit was becoming the company Vanessa had always imagined, a place where talent and hard work, not privilege or connections, defined success. But the road was far from smooth. As Summit's reputation grew, so did the scrutiny. Competitors, especially those who had benefited from the old system, began to lash out. Articles were written questioning Vanessa's leadership, her unconventional methods, and the impact her diversity initiatives might have on the company's long-term success. Lisa, still lurking in the shadows, didn't make it any easier. She quietly rallied old allies, hoping to undermine Vanessa's leadership at every turn. But Vanessa was prepared for this. She had known from the start that taking control wouldn't be easy, and she welcomed the challenge. She had already proven that her vision could reshape Summit. Now, she had to prove that it could sustain itself. One of her toughest moments came when a major client, one of Summit's biggest accounts, threatened to pull out due to the company's new diversity policies. The client, a powerful corporate conglomerate, had long worked with Summit under the old regime, where things were more comfortable, less diverse, less inclusive. The pressure on Vanessa to compromise was immense, but she refused to bend. In a tense meeting with the client's top executives, Vanessa stood her ground. "This is who we are now," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Summit Enterprises is no longer a company that only serves the few, it serves everyone. If that doesn't align with your values, then we part ways. But I will not change the course we're on." The room fell silent. The client's representatives were clearly taken aback, but Vanessa's conviction was undeniable. After a long pause, The client agreed to continue the partnership, albeit with some reservations. That moment marked a turning point for Vanessa. She had fought for Summit's future, and now, it was clear that the company was truly her own. Her leadership, once doubted, was now seen as a beacon of strength and vision. As the year came to a close, Vanessa reflected on how far she had come. She had not only reclaimed the company but reshaped it into something unrecognizable from what it had been. Summit was now a leader in its industry, not just because of its financial success, but because of its commitment to fairness, equality, and inclusion. The company was thriving, and so was she. Vanessa had proven to the world, and to herself, that she didn't just belong at the top, she had earned her place there. And this was just the beginning. The empire she had built was no longer just about business. It was about creating a lasting legacy, one that would continue to inspire future generations of leaders who would not only dream of success, but would demand it on their own terms.